There is a gate that holds us back from our healing, and it is fear. Because there is no love in fear, and love is the path to healing. I grew up on a farm, and this farm happened to be located next door to a hang gliding site. The site was established in the pioneering days of the sport, and hang gliders and their pilots were a common sight for me. Everyone has hang gliders landing in their neighbor's yard, so, just another day on the farm. What I didn't realize then is that the profound connection between the coincidence of this flying site being next door to my home, and the valuable tools that I would gain for navigating life's challenges from my experience with this sport. Looking back now, it makes me confident that there are no coincidences. Now, in the beginning of my experience with the actual sport of hang gliding, I was not actually flying. I wasn't involved with that, had no interest really in flying itself. The concept of strapping a tarp to an aluminum TV antenna and launching yourself off the side of a steep cliff just didn't appeal. And you have to remember that I watched this sport evolve from models of hang gliders that were really no better than what I just described to the sleek, technologically advanced flying aircraft that they are today. So anyway, the beginning of my experience was working for the club as a bookkeeper. The flying community is a beautiful family, not just a community. These people of like minds and like souls come together and support each other in a beautiful way. And I made many friends. But I knew as the time passed that there was no way I was going to get out of this without actually taking a flight. It was difficult to be a representative of the business and not actually having participated in the sport. Now, by the time I chose to consider this, the sport had become safe. The equipment had become standardized, safety routines had been established, and there was a standard for establishing the credentials of a pilot by that point. So, with that concern relieved, it was then choosing which pilot I was going to take this first flight with. Now, there were many master-rated pilots around me, but I chose a pilot with an advanced rating because I felt that he had more skill than most of the master-rated pilots. You see, this advanced rated pilot was being held back from being granted master rating for recklessly pushing the limits of his aircraft. In other words, he was an aerobatic pilot and my friend. I knew I was going to be coming back down to the ground, alive and in one piece. And so the perfect day arrived. The conditions were perfect, the timing was perfect. I had no more excuses. So with a death grip on this man and my eyes squeezed tightly shut, I did exactly as he had told me to do when he said the word clear, which was, to quote him, "Hang on to daddy and don't stop running." It was a soarable day, which means that the wind was coming in the correct direction and it was strong. These conditions require wingmen. They're there to help you stabilize your wings as you get your wing loaded to fly. When the pilot has the glider flying and is in control, they say clear and the wingmen let go. The wind was coming in strong enough this day that the side wires were as taut as piano strings as we moved ourselves out to the airflow. He steadied the glider and gave the command, and we took one step forward onto an elevator of wind that shot us 20 feet in the air. I dared open my eyes and realized that I was clinging to him like a baby monkey on its mama's back, and took a deep breath as he moved us into a smooth wave of air that was lifting up over the side of the mountain. And we flew forever. And it was wonderful. We laughed, we sang. He let me fly the glider. We played with other gliders in the air, and it was magical, to say the least. And then the time came for us to come back to the ground. And in his enthusiasm to impress upon me the fine qualities and joy of hang gliding, he chose to demonstrate exactly how fast a hang glider can lose altitude. By doing those said maneuvers that were holding him back from his master rating, we did several dives and wingovers, and the fun culminated in what is called a treetop skid run for the remaining 1/3 of the flight to the landing field. And I have to say, I was quite impressed. As we plunged at an alarming speed toward the treetops, I faced what I knew was going to be my death as our hands on the control frame brushed through the top of the foliage. I burst into uncontrollable laughter and began finally breathing again. And he did as I knew he would. He brought me back to the ground in one piece, safely, but not the same. Our return to the ground was somewhat less desirable than one might hope. Although safe, it lacked all grace, because my legs, having hung in the tourniquet that they called a harness for the previous hour, now no longer worked. In other words, we splatted in like a cow pie. After assuring that all were unscathed, I laid there staring up at the faces of my joyous comrades. I was hooked forever, and another aerobatic pilot was born. When my legs finally returned to the world of the living, I got up, changed my pants, got a drink of water, and said, "Where do I sign up?" There were other tandem flights to follow, but none that could ever compare, because I chose to never fly with him again. The one thing that I learned that day is that I was more than happy to rush headlong into my doom, but only if I was driving. So I eventually became a solo pilot, and in time became an instructor myself. But in the beginning, learning to fly was very difficult for me. I had spent many years around the sport, and I had seen it take people's lives. I learned from first-hand experience that nature and gravity don't play games, and my respect for it was born of sheer terror. And that made a pretty high mountain that I had to climb. But I am stubborn and persistent, and like a goat, I climbed that hill. My instructors treated me with kid gloves. There were virtually no women in the sport, and they were protective, and they demanded that my skills be their very best. And they told me that I was ready to fly long before I felt I was ready to fly. So they encouraged and supported me. They played along until I was comfortable, and I took my time, and I fought my fear and my doubt for what seemed like forever, holding myself back, because just pleasing them wasn't good enough. I couldn't please myself. I could not gain the confidence to allow myself to run off the edge of a cliff and rely completely on myself to get myself back down safely. And this wasn't because I didn't have the skills to do that job. I did. I was a very good pilot. Never a crash, never injured myself, never even broke anything on a glider. I had the skill to do it, and deep down I knew that. The skill that I was lacking was understanding how to deal with my fear, and the root of that fear, which was self-doubt. And what it took in the end was for me to just be scared shitless and do it anyway. And I did. And what I found is when my feet left the edge of that cliff for the first time, under my own control, I flew away. And fear, it stayed back on the cliff. But the lesson didn't end there with that first flight. Now it was up to me to get this aircraft back to the ground and me alive upon it. For the first time in my life, there was no one at all that could do anything for me. I was beyond everything, and it was all me. This is where I proved to myself that my excellent preparation had created a muscle memory within me. I was prepared, I knew how to fly, and I instinctively did the job. The thrill and exhilaration of getting on the other side of a hard-won battle was far more than I could have ever imagined. And this experience brought me a profound lesson. It taught me that self-doubt is your greatest adversary, and that self-respect and reliance is your greatest ally. And my experience with flying continued to bring those same circumstances to me over and over again, asking me to face the challenge over and over again. Flying in new conditions, flying in different places, pushing the envelope of what my aircraft could do, constantly asking me what I was willing to face and what I was willing to conquer. Eventually, I became an instructor, and I absolutely loved sharing what I had learned. And in time, I became the instructor that worked with the students who had special needs. Now, when I say this, I'm not talking about physical or mental handicaps. I am talking about the emotional handicap, fear and self-doubt, because after all, I was one of those students. And I was blessed to have been able to work with thousands of people from all walks of life, from every corner of the world. But my favorite students were the ones that I helped conquer their self-doubt and their fear. Because there was nothing like meeting them there in the landing field on the ground and knowing that I had given them something far more than just a first mountain flight. I had given them the tools to be prepared, have a flight plan, be scared shitless, and do it anyway. When you teach a skill over and over again, you eventually develop a routine, a style, and a way that you teach things. The way that you say things and explain things is unique to every instructor. As an instructor, you also begin to realize that there are patterns of things that people do to interfere with their progress. And the first challenge that all students face is learning to trust the glider. A hang glider is a peculiar animal in the sense that you cannot muscle them into the air. Brute strength is not an asset when you're attempting to launch a glider. You must finesse it into the air. You gently guide it, but you must fully allow it to fly and do its job. Only then will it pick you up and take you away from the hill. And this is where I came up with my first mantra. I would say, I'm going to ask you to do everything that your mother told you not to do. I'm asking you to run full speed down this hill. Do not look down, do not hang on, and do not stop running. Keep your eyes on your target and relax. A tall order, but what it takes to get a hang glider off the ground. No wind. And for the most part, many students did very well with this, but for every student, there is the moment that they must learn that they have to let go of the control frame before it will go into the air. Everything about launching a glider in calm winds hinges on whether or not you can allow the glider to pick you up and carry you away from the hill without over-controlling, hanging on, thinking you have to do too much. When in reality, all that you have to do is keep your eye on the target. Energy flows where attention goes, and it is no different when you're flying a hang glider. And intend to move forward until your feet leave the ground. Relax and trust, and you fly away from the hill. And that one principle for getting a glider to fly is also an excellent principle for learning to heal, and that is let go. I literally ran down the hill beside my students countless times, yelling, let go, relax, keep your eyes on the target, keep running, let go. It took me quite a while to realize that those things that I was yelling at my students were really the only things that I ever needed to know about how to forgive and therefore heal. What I've learned in the end is that learning to fly is no different than learning to live. That you have to be prepared, which means that you have to do the work to face your fear and resolve your self-doubt. That you have to have a flight plan, a clear goal of who or where you want to be, and the courage to just be afraid and do it anyway. And the trust that if you do your part well, that your vehicle, in this case an aircraft, will do its part well. And I found that this part applies as well. The Buddha says that resistance is the root of all suffering. And I liken this resistance to our attempt to over-control a glider upon launch. You can't force it into the air. It takes gentle input from you. but a firm will to move forward.